President Trump on Fox Business today making some of his strongest comments to date about how his administration plans to deal with China's lies, its cover-up, and refusal to warn the world about the severity of the Wuhan virus that it unleashed. Here he is.
There are many things we could do. We could do things. We could cut off the whole relationship. Now, if you did, what would happen? You'd save $500 billion if you cut off the whole relationship.
President Trump talking with Maria Bartiromo this morning. Joining us tonight is Treasury Secretary Steven Mnuchin. Mr. Secretary, great to have you with us. And let's begin with the president talking about the prospect of actually cutting off the relationship with China. His displeasure is clear. The acts of the Chinese are crystal clear. Your thoughts tonight?
Well, Lou, it's great to be back with you again. And as you said, the president is concerned. He's reviewing all his options. Obviously, we're very concerned about the impact of this virus on the economy, on American jobs, the health of the American public, and the president is going to do everything to protect the economy and protect American workers.
The president is making stronger and stronger statements, Mr. Secretary. We are hearing almost nothing from Wall Street. We're hearing almost nothing from corporate America. We've heard from the Chamber of Commerce, but they're talking about removing tariffs. It's sort of a mad interlude for the Chamber. But we, most importantly, have not heard a word from the Chinese government expressing remorse, expressing contrition, in any way communicating to the American people, the people of the world, about what they have done here in not choosing consciously not to warn the world of unleashing this deadly contagion. That is impossible to ignore, and it is, at the very least, extraordinarily a difficult and complex matter to resolve. Your thoughts?
Well, Lou, I agree with you. It's a difficult and complex matter, and the president has made very clear he wants more information. They didn't let us in. They didn't let us understand what was going on, and the American public have the right to understand all the facts.
They do indeed, and it's pretty clear amongst the facts that we can marshal is that conscious decision on the part of President Xi not to warn the world. That's simply unforgivable as well as unconscionable, is it not?
I agree with you, Lou. There should have been a lot more information coming out of China, and the president is reviewing the situation.
Well, let's turn to the economy, the devastation wrought by the Wuhan virus. The damage is extraordinary. You have talked about it as an unprecedented event, and certainly it is. We are looking at trillions of dollars being added to the national debt. The Federal Reserve balance sheet is skyrocketing toward $8–9 trillion, who knows? And we have a Federal Reserve chairman stepping up yesterday to talk about how difficult and how severe this downturn is. Totally unhelpful, to put it in the kindest terms I can, and without talking about any of the policies that he will pursue or solutions that he might offer. The Fed chair, your sense of how well the cooperation is between your departments, the administration, and the Fed, and what in the world Jerome Powell thinks he's doing as Fed chair.
Well, I think, Lou, first of all, let me just start with, we had an unprecedented response from Congress, $3 trillion. We're putting that money into the economy. We're just beginning to see the impact on that. That's very important. As part of that, we have over $450 billion that we can work with the Federal Reserve. I must say they've been a terrific partner working with us on these facilities. We've approved about $2.5 trillion. And if you look at the corporate bond markets, just the mere fact that we announced these facilities with the Fed unlocked record issuance of corporate bonds. So companies like Boeing could borrow in excess of $25 billion. So I think you're being a little harsh on the Fed at this point, because the Fed has really done a great job. Whether it's the monetary policy or it's working on these facilities, this is what's keeping American business alive.
I'm being perhaps harsh. I don't mean to be. I'm just trying to be straightforward about it. A Federal Reserve chairman, in my experience, who talks as Jerome Powell does, without consideration for both effect and prospect of a policy solution, is frankly contributing to the problem rather than solving it. That's been, I think, the history of Fed chairmen and chairs. Don't you think?
Let me just say, I think the good news is we got approval to spend $3 trillion. The good news is interest rates are really low, so we do care about deficits, but we can borrow this money for 10, 20, 30 years, lock it up at close to zero in many cases, or 1% on long-term borrowing. So we're going to do everything we can. The president is determined to protect the U.S. economy and U.S. workers and open up in a safe way.
I think that's laudable, and I certainly am cheering both you and the president, the administration, and yes, the Federal Reserve on as you do so. Now comes the Speaker of the House with a $3 trillion additional piece of legislation, a third of which would go to states and other governments. I mean, this looks like utter madness to me, Mr. Secretary. What does it look like to you, what she has proposed?
Well, I think the Speaker is off working on her own, as opposed to on the last two deals we had enormous bipartisan support in the Senate. You know, we passed one 96-0, one 100-0. We had tremendous support. I think our view is let's take a step back for a few weeks. Let's see how the $3 trillion we just got approved is working. And I think it's pretty clear that what the Speaker is doing is a partisan position that isn't going to go anywhere if they pass it in the House.
Yeah, it's unclear what kind of partisan position it is because it was constructed without benefit of Congress being in session, as you well know. But the idea that $1 trillion would be going to governments, all being treated exactly the same when what we're dealing with in some cases is some of the most irresponsible state governments in this country's history. And to support that kind of behavior, conduct, and policies that are led by various governors across the state would be irresponsible, don't you think, of the federal government?
Well, we've made very clear that we are not bailing out the states for previous issues and bad management and pension problems. Any of the money, and we did approve $150 billion that's going to the states, is for coronavirus expenses. We also approved it could go to policemen, firemen, first responders, so we made sure that none of those people got laid off, given what they're doing protecting us. But for now, we don't need more money in the states. We need to see how this plays out, and we're working hard to get all this money out into the economy.
Out into the economy and out to the men and women of this country, working men and women and their families who need it most. You have done a magnificent job, Mr. Secretary, and we applaud the administration and you for doing so. Good to have you with us.